Hello everyone, welcome back to our discussion on the different types of learning. In the previous session, we have discussed about four different types of learning: habituation, sensitization, and in associative learning, we discussed about the famous classical conditioning and operant conditioning. In today's discussion, we are going to see the other types of learning. First, we'll see the type which is called as taste aversion. So, taste aversion is nothing but the avoidance of a particular type of food which causes illness or the one which is causing a bad taste. So, this type of taste aversion, that is, the avoiding certain types of food as they might cause illness in the first exposure. So, some illness might have caused by a certain type of food in the first exposure, and as a result, the animals try to avoid it in the subsequent exposures. So, it has been long known that rats are adept at avoiding all types of food that make them sick. This is the reason why rats are difficult to poison. If the rat takes a small bite of a poison food, becomes ill, and then it recovers, it will thereafter try to avoid this food. And this type of avoiding a particular bait, because they are avoiding a bait which is placed by humans, which is a poison, and avoiding such baits is usually termed as bait shy. And taste aversion, some scientists consider this to be similar to that of classical conditioning, but there is difference in opinion, or there is difference in this type of learning when you compare it with the normal classical conditioning, and that's why we have distinguished it as a different type of learning which is called as taste aversion. And now we'll discuss the experiment that proved taste aversion. So, for this particular experiment, two groups of rat were taken in cages, and the cages were provided with or were provided with bottles which is containing nozzles. So, these water bottles contain a nozzle, and when the rat touches the nozzle, water will drip from the nozzle. Only when it touches the nozzle, it will drip water from the bottle. So such bottles were placed inside the in into the cages, and what they did was, in the first group of rat, when a particular rat touches the nozzle, simultaneously a bright light followed by a clicking sound, which is followed by, or simultaneously, or three things will happen at the same time when the rat touches the nozzle to drink water. So when it touches the nozzle to drink the water, what happens is simultaneously three things happen. A bright light will be flashed, a clicking sound will be produced, and a very mild dose of X-ray will hit that particular rat. This mild dose of X-ray will not harm the rat or will not cause the death of the rat. This mild dose of X-ray will make the rat sick, or a feeling of nausea, or a feeling of illness. And subsequently, what happens is that uh, produce an illness. And in the other group, what the difference in the other group was that in the other group the same situations was provided. That is, they will when they lick the nozzle, what happens is that uh, when they lick the nozzle, a bright light will be flashed, a clicking sound will be produced, and instead of X-ray, or instead of radiation, what they were exposed to was an electric shock at the floor of the cage. So whenever they touched the nozzle in the second group, instead of X-ray, all the other conditions were the same, but the only difference was they were provided with X-rays, and the water which is provided through the bottle was sweetened water. So whenever they drink the sweetened water, one group will be provided with one group will be subjected to a flashing of light, a clicking sound, and radiation. The other group will be subjected to flashing of light, clicking of sound, and electric shock in the floor. So this was continued, and they got conditioned to this. And when again presented with sweetened water, accompanied by flashing of light and sound, none of them touched the nozzle. That means if the bottle was given to them, and when they approached the bottle, if this lighting and the clicking sound was produced without x-ray, none of them will touch the nozzle. And this particular group, both the groups, whether it be shock, whether it be x-ray, they develop something which is called as a classically conditioned aversion. And here the unconditioned stimulus is shock or radiation. And shock or radiation is the unconditioned stimulus. And here the conditioned stimulus is the taste, light, and sound. Because the radiation and shock, they are unconditioned, because they do not see, or they do not uh, actually feel it. But what they try to avoid is the taste, light, and sound. So these three, they avoid, or they try to avoid this, if these are produced, what happens is that if they lick the nozzle, if the bright light is and the clicking sound is produced, what goes into their mind is that they either might go sick or they might get a shock. So they avoid. So that is why it is called as conditioned stimulus as taste, light, and sound, and the unconditioned stimulus is shock or radiation. And now the question comes: did the rat learn to avoid all of these stimuli or the sum? Because there are many stimulus. Unlike in classical conditioning, we had only one or two stimulus. Here, there is three or more stimuluses working together. So now we have to know, or we should know, whether the rat is avoiding all the stimulus or they are recognizing only some to avoid it. So here the rats, for this for knowing this, rats were given either sweetened water or unflavored water accompanied by the light and noise. And what they did was, the rats which were shocked felt the pain and developed the aversion to light and sound, but not to the sweetened taste. The rats which were radiated developed an aversion to the sweet taste, not to the light and sound. So here is the difference. So what happens is that the rats which were shocked, that is in the same experiment, when the rats were shocked, the conditions of the same experiment, when the rats were given the shock, what they developed the aversion to the light and sound, but not to the taste. So here the correlation is between pain, because when you get a shock, you have a pain. Okay, but when you get a radiation, you are not feeling any pain, but you tend to be sick. So that is the two conditions. That is, when you get a shock, you feel the pain. When you get a radiation, you do not feel any pain, but or you fell to sickness, or you feel that you are sick. So here the rat which felt the pain, that means rats which were shocked, they are trying to be averted because of the light and sound, or they are averted by the light and sound, and not to the taste, not to the sweet and taste, because they are averted to the light and sound. But the rats which were radiated, and the ones which fell sick because of the radiation, they were averted to the sweet taste because they are not feeling any pain. So what they sense, that because they had something which was sweetened or flavored water, they are feeling the illness. And the sight and the or the light and the sound sight or the light and the sound, which induced the external, or the light and sound did not have any effect. So they were averted, the radiated ones were averted to the taste, and the others were averted to the light and sound. So here the rats learning dependent on the unconditioned stimulus. So taste is usually associated with illness, and sight, and so what you see, that is a light, and sound is usually associated or externally induced pain. So this is also or so this is demonstrated in rats. And when you come to birds, birds also show food aversion, but it is of a different type. So here, birds, the food aversion is due to the color and not due to the taste. In an example with quails, what they did was that the quails were conditioned by providing blue color poisoned sour water, and after their recovery, they refused to drink the blue colored water even if it was not poisoned. So what they did was that in quails, they gave the quail with sweetened or the colored poisoned water, which also had a sour taste. And what in the next experiment, so they got the illness because of the poison. They fell some illness, they fell ill, and they recovered. In the second experiment, what they did was that they gave simply unflavored, without any sour taste, without any poison, just the blue colored water, and a plain water which had a sour taste without the poison, just the sour taste. And what they saw was that the quails were avoiding the blue colored water, which was not sour, but they were having the sour water, which was colorless. And this proved that in birds, the taste the taste aversion is dependent on sight or color. And this proves that aversions are species specific, or that depends on their adaptations. When you come to mammals like rats, they taste something because in the wandering of food they taste something and feel or they are usually concerned with their adaptive, or they have certain adaptive values. But for birds, the sight or the color is the main factor that is causing what is called as taste aversion. So these taste aversion with the examples of birds, as well as the examples with the case with rats, we proved that it is species specific. So these results in the rats reflect a build in the neutral neural relationship. So this would make good biological sense. So in the world of the rat, an omnivore that selects its food mainly on the basis of taste, flavor may be the most reliable cue that warns of impeding illness. If so, a tendency to associate sickness with preceding taste, that is, it is like saying that illness would make a rat think, "What did I eat?" And this tendency has a survival value in them. So, but in birds, the situation is different. As I said, we said earlier in the example of the quail, they usually rely on visual cues, and that is also having the visual cues and adaptation is having an evolutionary advantage or an survival advantage in the case of birds. So with this we come to the end of our discussion in the particular topic, which is called as taste aversion. In the next session we'll be discussing about the next type of learning, which is called as cognitive learning. And in cognitive learning we'll be discussing of three types of cognitive learning. Thanks for hearing.